Hello and welcome back to the Insane Knitters YouTube video channel. Today we are going to talk about how to knit a gauge swatch. I've seen so many videos that show these beautiful gauge swatches that people make and how to count your gauge using a gauge counter, but I have not seen a video detailing how to make the swatch in order to find out your gauge. So I did a little research and found some resources for you. I'm going to be showing you how to knit a gauge swatch using Marion Edmonds and Ahza Moore's book, When Bad Things Happen to Good Knitters, an emergency survival guide. This is beyond awesome. I love this book. It's really helpful for learning the basics of knitting. Now, when you buy yarn, you'll get a little label with it, and it'll tell you all kinds of stuff about the yarn, what it's made of, how thick it is, what your gauge should be on the needles, certain needles, how to take care of it. And I picked this particular yarn because it's light. I've had some people say, you know, they want something lighter to show the colors, and I got a white background for you. So this particular yarn is 100% acrylic. Generally I like to use wool, but this is demonstration, so whatever. 100% acrylic yarn, it's a medium weight, and they say that on, see if you can see the little label here, hopefully that'll focus, they say that on a size 9 needle you should have 16 stitches over 4 inches and 22 rows. And then they give the same, a different gauge for crochet hooks, what size you should use, and there's your care instructions at the bottom. Now we'll talk more about blocking in another video. That's the thing, is we've got some gauge swatches here that I've knitted for you, and I'll talk about them. Here's the difference here. See, this one, these two here have been blocked. I steam blocked these with an iron, and I'll talk more about that later. This one has not been, and you can see how it curls up at the edges. This one is a little harder to count your gauge on, but you can still do it because all you can, you can just straighten it out. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so here we've got some gauge swatches. Now, how do you make one of these? Well, what I did is, using the needle size the pattern calls for, whatever pattern you're using, but for right now, we'll just use this label. This label says a size 9 needle. So, using the needle size that your pattern or your yarn calls for, cast on enough stitches to make a swatch 4 inches wide plus 6 more stitches. And you can find this on your yarn label. So this label says 16 stitches knit on size 9 needle will give you 4 inches, and that's about 4 stitches to the inch. So you cast on the 16 stitches they call for, and then you add 6 more for a total of 22. And then you knit in garter stitch, which is you knit every row. This is garter stitch down here at the bottom, and you'll see there's little bumps, and then if you separate the bumps you can see the little V's in between. So this is garter stitch. Knit in garter stitch for 4 rows. Then change to stockinette stitch, or if your gauge swatch instructions on your pattern call for a different stitch, knit that. But for most gauge, stockinette is what you use. Be sure and knit 3 stitches at the beginning. I missed a couple here, but so what? Just go with it. Pretend. Knit 3 stitches at the beginning, and then knit 3 stitches at the end. So you've got knit, these are all knit stitches, and then when you turn it over, the other side, you knit 3 stitches, and then you purl, and then you knit 3. So it gives you this nice border. These are all knit stitches. So we've got knit, knit, knit. And then on the back, when you come back, it's knit 3, purl, and knit 3 at the end. Now, however many stitches you're going, this is 22. So what you do is the garter stitch, the knit stitches will make a nice border, and this is the piece of the stitch that you want for your gauge. That's what you're going to use to count. So you knit in stockinette for however many rows your skein of yarn calls for to make 4 inches. In this case, it says 22 rows will give you 4 inches on a size 9 needle. Then you knit 4 more rows of garter stitch to finish up that border, and you bind off if you want. We'll get to that in a minute. in pattern speak, here's how you make a basic gauge swatch. Use a row counter to help you, the little row counter that I don't have right now, but the little clicky, to count how many rows that you're getting, and then bind off. So you don't have to bother counting your rows there. Now, for this one, it's, you know, rows 1 through 4 you knit, row 5 you knit, row 6 is on the back, row 6. This is where row 6 starts. You can see right here, row 6 starts. And it's all purl bumps. And so there's knit 3, and then purl, and then knit 3. And then you just continue on until, you know, you're done. But somewhere around row 9, see how I've got these little purl bumps right in the middle of my gauge swatch? See those? Those tell me what size of needle I used to make this gauge swatch. So you don't have to go back and figure it out or guess or, you know, write it on a post-it note. It's right there. So if you leave this and you come back, you can tell what size needle you used by counting the purl bumps along the top edge there. So we've got, all right, here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is the swatch I knitted on size 9s. This over here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are the size 7s. And this we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is the size 8 needle I used. So there, 7, 8, 9. Different gauge swatches for different size needles. And you never have to worry about what size you used. So, that way you don't repeat yourself if your gauge is off and you know where to go. Then you repeat rows 9 and 10. I'll write this down in the info section. And then you bind off. You knit 4 more rows of garter stitch, bind off. Now, you do one of two things. You can treat the swatch as you would, this is my little cheat sheet, you can treat the swatch as you would the garment. You know, this is the best thing to do so that you can figure out how your yarn behaves. You know, you can wash the swatch as you would the sweater you're going to knit from it. You can steam block it, you know, because your stitches will change based on how you take care of it. This particular pattern says, you know, you can wash it, you know, don't iron it, various other things. That's how to take care of your yarn. So there's various things that you can do. A lot of people don't count their gauge until they've treated the yarn swatch exactly how they treat their garment. Because, especially with like sock yarn, it changes based on, you know, when you wash it. So the gauge will change. If you don't want to, you can just count it as is. See, these are the swatches I've blocked, and here's the swatch I didn't. You can see it curls up at the edge, but I can still perfectly well count this as is if I want to. If you want to start your project right away, go ahead and calculate your gauge. And you do this by measuring your stitches with one of these little swatch counters, or gauge counters, knit checks. And you do this over 4 inches. Now, above, you know, in our little pattern here, it calls for size 9 needles, which is, this is our size 9. And we, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is our size 9. And it says on a size 9 needle, we're supposed to get 16 stitches and 22 rows per 4 inches. Okay, so this gauge swatch is about 4 inches wide and a little over, about 4 inches 4 inches long, 4 inches wide. That's what we want. Now, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. Now, if you have too many stitches per inch, so you know, you'd go ahead and you'd count your rows here. And I did count this at one point, and so what it ended up being is on the size 9 needle, I got however many, but it ended up being, for this pattern, what I needed to use was, I think, a size 7 needle, because my stitches were too tight or whatever. I don't exactly remember how this worked, but what you want to do now is count your rows. You know, you line it up and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like that. And so you should have however many. If you have too many stitches in your project, if you count your gauge and you've got too many stitches per inch, okay, they wanted me to have 16 stitches. Well, in this size needle, I only had 15 stitches. Size 9 needle, I only had 15 stitches per inch. So I didn't have enough stitches. If you don't have enough stitches, your project is going to be too big. It will be too big, and you need to go down a needle size so you can get more stitches per inch. If you have to keep decreasing your needle. See, I had to go down to 8s, and then I went down to 7s to get your gauge. If you have too many stitches, your project will be too small. See, my size 7 needle here gave me 16.5 stitches per inch. Now I know a half a stitch doesn't sound like much, but just half a stitch can add 4 sizes to your project. So you have to be on gauge. Gauge is very important for garments that you're going to wear, like sweaters and so on. Otherwise, if you just knit, it won't fit properly, and that's important, especially if you're going to put all that work in. So this is 16.5 inches on a size 7 needle. This will make my project too big, or this will make my project too small. This will make my project just about right, because on a size 8 needle that I did, my gauge ended up being 16 stitches. So instead of the size 9 needle it called for, my gauge, how I knit, tells me that I need to use a size 8 needle instead if I'm going to use this yarn. So there we go. And that's pretty much all there is to know about that. Now, if you don't get the right number of stitches, horizontally, that's okay. Horizontally, that's okay, because you know what, if your row count doesn't match, it's no problem. Just follow the pattern, and you might have to add more rows or fewer depending on what the pattern calls for. The horizontal gauge is more important than the vertical gauge. If you don't have the vertical gauge, I meant to say vertical, not horizontal, sorry. If you don't have the vertical gauge, if you don't have the rows that you need, it says called for 22 rows. On a size 8 needle, I had 24 rows, so I'd have to decrease my rows instead to get the right amount that I needed. But anyway, that's how you do that. Now, what do you do with your swatch? You can do a couple things. If you don't bind it off properly and just count it while it's still on the needle, you can unravel it and use the yarn for something else. Or, you can keep all these and sew them into a little blanket, make a little blanket later if you want. So there you go. Special thanks again to Marion Edmonds and Ahza Moore of When Bad Things Happen to Good Knitters with their perfect gauge swatch. I did make a gauge swatch like they do in the book. See, these are all individual swatches, but you don't have to bind off every time you change needle size. You can make one long swatch. See, you can really see, hopefully you can see the difference here in needle size. Let's see if I can pull back a little bit so we can get the whole thing in there. Sorry for the shaky cam, but there. See I hope you can really see the difference in the needle size. It goes from big, this is size 9s, 8s, and 7s, and you can check your gauge on each one. This swatch has been blocked. So, and we'll talk about blocking in another video. But there you are. That's how to make a gauge swatch. And again, I will put in the comments section the instructions of how I do it. 4 rows of garter stitch, stockinette, garter stitch. So, and you want 3 stitches on either side to make this a nice border. So 4 rows of garter stitch, knit 3, knit your right side, knit 3 on the back, you knit 3, purl your wrong side, knit 3, back and forth, back and forth. There you go. How to knit a gauge swatch.